they introduced a master's program in instructional design. And when I saw that, that was my light bulb moment. This is what I've always wanted to do. I just didn't know there was a name for it.
Welcome back to Educator University. What if the skills you use as a teacher every day could open doors to new opportunities? Skills you already have, like lesson planning, engaging students, and differentiating instruction. Today's guest, Jackie Pelegrin, is an instructional designer, author, college professor, and host of Designing with Love. She helps educators turn their teaching experience into careers of instructional design and beyond. Welcome, Jackie.
Great. Thank you, Annie. I'm so glad we got to connect, and we're both fellow podcasters. So wonderful to be on this. Yes. And talk to those educators out there that are trying to navigate things. So I'm happy about this.
Yes, and you're part of that navigation for some of these teachers listening because you really focus on instructional design. Now, this is a term that maybe we haven't heard of before, so could you describe what it is you do? What is instructional design, and what does it mean to be an instructional designer?
Right. So it's really interesting because there's such an intersection between instructional design and teaching. So yeah, so it's really great. So I looked this up even on Google just to kind of see what does Google have to say about it. And of course I always add my own wording to it. So I like what it says, but I like to put my own twist on it. So it's basically like a systematic process of being able to create those effective, engaging experiences for learners. And it can be at any stage of learning. So it can be little kiddos, right? Like the kindergartners, it can be all the way up to adults. So that's what's great about instructional design. And so what we try to do is we try to take those experiences and we try to plan that out. We combine educational theory and educational materials. We also incorporate technology into it because we know technology is a big part of that. And then just helping those learners acquire and retain that information. So it's all about taking it from just an idea and following it through. And so one of the models that is commonly used in instructional design is the ADDIE model. There's a lot of acronyms, just like in teaching, there's a lot of acronyms in instructional design. So it's a process. You and I, we can go a little bit deeper into that, but different processes allow us to be able to know, did we actually reach that outcome that we were hoping for? So it's not just a hodgepodge of things that we're just throwing together and saying, here, learner, go ahead and do this and just have fun. So yeah, there's a system behind it for a reason. So it's great.
Yeah, there is a lot to unpack there. I think in terms of a career, like when it comes to instructional design, are we looking at a corporate world or is it something that you would do within the educational world or maybe both?
Yes, it's great. What's really nice about instructional design is the history and the roots of it. If you have learners that have ever, or listeners, I mean, that have ever looked at instructional design and done a little bit of research, it goes all the way back to World War II and during military training. And so there's I can't remember his name, but he founded kind of instructional design, and they started it at a university. And what he wanted to do was help to train the soldiers as they were going into the army and they were learning basic training and all of that, so that way they could learn what they needed to learn and then go out into the battlefield. And so it was just in time training, right? But giving them what they needed. And then they realized, you know what, this method really works good for the military. Let's bring it out into the corporate world and education. So what's really great about instructional design is it's been around since World War II. It's a lot of the models and theories like ADDIE have been around since the 60s. And so it's evidence-based. It stood the test of time. And so that's what's really nice about instructional design is you can go into K through 12 and stay in that realm. You can go into corporate. You can go into higher ed if you want. So if you want to go from that and step up, and then nonprofit and government too. So there's a wide range of depending upon where your listeners are and their interest as well. So it's really great.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to kind of this idea of instructional design and maybe moving outside the classroom, sometimes our teachers and they're a little hesitant. They don't really understand that they may already have a lot of the skills. Like
Right.
you're mentioning some acronyms they may not hear, but they probably have a lot of skills that they could translate to this new position,
Right.
correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
Right. So some of the things that they commonly do every day, like lesson planning and being able to understand how different learners acquire information. How do they go about actually learning the content? Because we know it's not a one size fits all approach when it comes to planning curriculum and even instructing students. So that curriculum and instruction, all those different things that a lot of teachers They do get that, right? They learn about the different learning theories, so those translate into instructional design really well. And I would also say being able to being able to manage projects is also important, and I think teachers have to do that as well because you're managing different classes, right? And so it's really important to have that, and also collaborating with others is really important in instructional design. Being able to work with different individuals, whether it's stakeholders, subject matter experts, and I work with faculty all the time, every day. So being able to, understand where they're coming from. So I think being that relationship building, no matter whether you're a teacher or instructional designer, I think there's translatable skills that really carry over that they may not realize that they have, and they're like, "Oh, okay, so it's not as foreign as I may think it is." So it's really nice that they have that.
Yeah. So a lot of the day-to-day stuff you're talking about, teachers may already have experience in. Could you describe maybe what does it look like to be a designer of instruction? Like, is it a full-time gig or is it something that you would do on the side? Like, what does it look like in terms of employment?
Right. Yeah, that's a great question because there are so many different avenues that you can take as an instructional designer. So you can do a full-time job where you work for an employer or you work for, say, the government or something like that, do a full-time job. Or you could do freelancing where if you decide, I want to kind of do it on my own and I don't want to rely on a corporate structure or have an employer, but I want to be able to have my own hours, and especially for those that, may have children and they want to be able to stay at home and have that flexibility, they can do that. And so they can freelance and be able to do that as well. So it's nice because there's different opportunities to be able to break into the field and feel like you're not constrained to just one industry or one way of doing it. Now, especially now with everything with technology and the internet and everything, it's really opened up a lot of doors for different pathways to be able to do the job. So it's really great to have that as well.
So if teachers listening and thinking, okay, I'm interested potentially,
hmm
what does it look like? Does it require a degree or does it require a certification or is it just kind of learn as you
That's
go?
a great question. Yeah, it kind of all depends on what industry you're going into. Typically, when you're looking at higher education, they want you to have some type of degree. It doesn't have to be a terminal degree like a PhD or EDD, but that most of the time they want you to have a master's degree when you're looking at higher education. K through 12, maybe not so much. They may not require that. So you may be able to just get a certification or take some classes and show that you have that knowledge going into it. And corporate kind of depends. I've seen some where they want a bachelor's degree, some want a master's degree. So I would say just kind of look at what path you want to go into. If do you want to stay in K through 12? Is that where your real true passion is and where your love is? Or are you like, well, I really kind of like higher education and I think I would like to design instruction for adults and do that, whether it's curriculum or it's employee training, something like that. You can go into those within higher education as well. Or if you like corporate training and you like that L&D, learning and development type of atmosphere, you could go into that as well. So just kind of, see what pathways you could go into. Government may be different too. They may require some higher education. Yeah, so I recommend looking into that. And if you feel like you do need that additional education, look and see what your options are. Because if you already have a master's degree in education, look to see if maybe there's a certificate you can offer, and that would help bridge some of that content that you already know, where you don't have to retake some of the classwork and feel like you're repeating what you've already taken. So just kind of see what's out there and what's available for you and how it'll help you in your career going forward as well. That's what I always say to my students as they're in their master's degree. I'm like, just look at your career paths, look at what you can do, and don't look at education as a means to an end. Look at it as something, it's giving you that opportunity to get the training and something that you're interested in, and then just go back to your why and keep remembering that, because when the coursework gets a little rough sometimes and it gets hard, it's good to go back to that why and know, okay, if I'm going to school, this is why I'm doing it, and then that can help you stay on that path and finish your program if that's the path you go as well.
Yeah, having that purpose behind what you're doing is such a such an important piece to moving forward and being motivated. I love
Yes.
that. So, I mean, teachers listening are thinking, okay, what does it look like to actually do this job? Maybe I'm used to being in the classroom all the day, and is it going to be like, am I behind a computer all day? Am I working with people? Is it different depending on the job? Could you give us kind of a little bit of a insight into what this job like practically might look like for them?
Sure, yes. So, depending upon the industry or even the organization that you work for, it may be fully remote. A lot of companies and a lot of organizations are doing that fully remote. I have that type of job where it's fully remote. Some may be hybrid, where maybe you go into the office a couple days a week and then you work remote. Some may be fully on site. But I rarely see when I go on LinkedIn, because I do like to see what's out there on the LinkedIn jobs. And sometimes I'll go on Indeed and I'll see what is the ratio of fully remote to hybrid to, fully in person. And I would say probably 80% of what I see is remote, 100% remote. So that's good. That gives, everyone opportunities. So I would say on a day-to-day basis, what my day looks like is I'm usually in meetings on my computer. So I'm at my computer a lot for sure. So it's good to know that, because if those that are used to being in the classroom and having that in-person experience and having that interaction face to face with the kids and with others, it takes some getting used to, right? To understand that you're going to now be in a remote environment and making sure that you have that space set up, having that office space, but also collaborating with others is very important. That's what I do day in and day out in those meetings. I collaborate with other stakeholders and subject matter experts and people on my team. And so it's a collaborative effort. And then some of it is data entry and kind of entering information and being able to check content and make sure it aligns. So yeah, so it's a combination of different things that, but I would say a lot of it is project management and collaboration, and then team meetings as well, and being able to do that and just manage those projects. So yeah, so I would say that's a day in the life of a typical instructional designer like myself. Yeah.
That's good to know. And you came from the classroom, correct? If I remember correctly? You were a teacher at one point or no?
Yeah, my path was kind of interesting. I was going to go into business and go into marketing, and then I started working as an admissions counselor in higher education, and that's where I think my love for education came about. So I started doing that, and then they introduced a master's program in instructional design, and when I saw that, that was my light bulb moment. I was just like, this is what I've always wanted to do. I just didn't know there was a name for it. I actually said that out loud at work. I was like, this is what I've always wanted to do. And everybody looks at me like, what is she talking about? I'm like, this is it. This is what I wanted to do. And so it was really neat, because when I was halfway through the program, they had an embedded certificate in it. So I earned the certificate. And then right after that, they had an opening in the employee training and development department. They actually had two openings, one for a trainer and one for an instructional designer. I was like, oh my goodness, this is great, but I haven't finished my master's yet. What do I do? So I went to my manager. And I was like, yeah, I'm torn between the trainer and the instructional designer, because I kind of thought, being a trainer would be fun. I kind of like that. And she said, think about what you want to do every day, day in and day out. Do you want to get up in front of a classroom and actually teach adults and be a trainer and do that every day? Or do you want to be behind the scenes creating all the content and seeing it come to fruition? And I'm like, yeah, I want to do that. I want to do the creative part. So she said, there's your answer right there. So when I applied for the job, I was in an interview, and the manager at the time, she was like, okay, Jackie, I know you don't have your master's, but I see a lot of ambition in you. And she said, let's make a deal. And I said, okay, we're going to make a deal. Wow. Okay. She said, if you finish your master's and complete it here at Walden, I will go ahead and give you the job. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. So yeah, so I got the job and just jumped right in and just did it. So never looked back since then. So it's been great. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, what a journey to get to this point. And like you said, it is nice to feel that aha moment of this is what I wanted to do. I just didn't have a name for it. And hopefully as we talk, people listening who might be interested are thinking maybe this is for me, that maybe they're getting that aha moment right now if they're listening,
Right,
you know?
exactly. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I ventured into corporate. I did corporate for a little while, worked for PetSmart for 6 months. So it was nice to get a little bit of that corporate. Then I came back to higher education. But what was interesting is when I started my first job, it was in employee learning and development. So it was a lot of employee training and professional development. Then going into the corporate, I kind of naturally went into that, and that worked well. But then when I came back into higher education, it was curriculum. and it's different. There are some similarities, but it's different. And I remember the recruiter mentioning that to me. She said, I've worked for Grand Canyon before. Just be aware when you go into curriculum, it's going to be different. And she was right. It's different, but you learn to adapt, and you look to see what's similar, what can I learn from it, and so it's really great. And I think it helped me to go into teaching too, because I've been teaching instructional design graduate courses for 5 years, and so having that prior experience and knowing the curriculum and how it all comes together not only helped me appreciate the work, but then when I became an instructor, I was like, now I can understand what the instructors were all talking about, all the different things that were their pet peeves, right? Or the things that students would constantly, get incorrect, or just they had trouble with. And it didn't quite click with me until I became an instructor. And I was like, oh my goodness, I get it now. I understand. I have more empathy for them. And I feel like I'm a better instructor, and I'm also a better instructional designer because I now see both sides of the coin. So I think for all of your listeners that are educators, I think, those that are teaching, they know what I'm talking about. But if they can do the instructional design a little bit too, I think it helps you kind of understand a little bit of that from that other standpoint too. So anytime they can teach,
Yeah, it
it's
really
great. Yeah.
yeah, it really gives a lot of
Yeah.
different views of
Right.
it. Yeah.
Exactly.
I didn't realize, so instructional design is actually a master's program, or are you just like a class within a bigger master's program?
Yeah. So at Grand Canyon University, where I teach, they have a instructional design program. It's a master's of science in instructional design, and they have a combination of education courses, and then they have instructional design courses. So I teach the instructional design courses. There's, I think, 7 or 8 in the program, so they're kind of sprinkled a little bit throughout, and then they kind of get bulk them towards the end. So you start with the EDU courses, and then you build up, and then you take the instructional design. So you get models and theories, you learn about the systematic design of instruction, how that all works, and then you take multimedia. So you get a good sense of, okay, this is what instructional design is about. And so it's really neat. And you also get a little bit of that in this program, the organizational workplace performance part of it. So you get to understand how do organizations go about that. And a lot of I probably have about 80% of my students, would say, are K through 12 educators. So that's all new for them. They don't quite understand, how do organizations work. And like, for example, there's in this class I'm teaching, there's this term called OKRs, and it stands for objectives and key results. And a lot of my students are like, I've never done this before. So they have to create personal ones, and then they have to create organizational ones. And they usually do it for their district or their school. And so, but it's a good exercise for them, because then they get to not only think about their personal objectives and key results, things that they want to accomplish as an instructional designer, but also how they can do that more broad. And, so they start with the micro, and then they do macro, and they look at the organization as a whole and how do those tie into each other. So it's really an interesting exercise. And they realize, okay, it's not just about me, and it's not just about my goals, but I'm looking at that as a whole. So no matter what industry they go into, they can see that some of those things really carry over into different industries. So it's really neat to see that and have them do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is a really great skill to be able to take a learning objective, and see it from all angles, not just how you want to teach it, but also what does the employer want, or what does the district want you to do in terms of creating that instruction. So yeah, what a great skill to have.
Exactly.
That's
Yeah.
And I think this is good for teachers listening, because sometimes you need to get a master's degree to increase that pay, just practically
Right.
get that pay raise. So maybe this could be something listening. Okay, well maybe from the master's degree to master's degree, and this could be an option for people listening. So yeah, that's good to know that it's also an option for that.
Right,
So
exactly.
yeah,
And it's interesting too, the pay structure is it depends, but usually if you're looking at education as an instructional designer, and then you're looking at corporate, you'll see the pay scale is a little bit higher for corporate. They tend to start higher, but it's always good to know when you're what you're getting into, because the pay is not always as it seems, right? And so looking at, okay, what are the requirements? So it's always good to kind of get a feel for that. And if you look on LinkedIn, maybe there's someone you could connect with, that maybe the hiring manager or something like that, and say, hey, can I just, is there anything I can do to, so forming those networking connections are so important. I've been able to really connect with many people on LinkedIn, and be able to do that. So I would encourage all the listeners, look for different groups that are on LinkedIn that are instructional design related, and then if they're closed, just request to join the group. And usually if it's closed, they'll usually let you in, and they'll say, yeah, you can do this. So one that I joined recently is the iSpring Learning Exchange, and that's a really good group because it's for those that are new to the field of instructional design, or those who have been in it, like me. I've been in it for 15 years, and I'm able to kind of bounce ideas off of others and look at their work. And they do have a contest I think it's every quarter. They have a e-learning contest where you get to actually create e-learning, and you get to, so it's really neat. And they have prizes and stuff like that. So you actually get to, and it's more than that. It's about, just being able to create something and be able to have it critiqued by professionals, and being able to take that feedback and learn from it. So it's a really great experience, and then you get to showcase it with others. So it's scary sometimes, right, to put your work out there and have it critiqued, but it's so important. It's part of the process as an instructional designer to be able to get that feedback and do that without fear. That's actually a podcast I did recently, Feedback Without Fear. Being able to take that and learn from it. And so I'm sure teachers, they have to get feedback on their curriculum and their teaching methods all the time. So it's not something that's new to them in that realm. But if they're doing it in another way, it can be a little bit like scary. It's like, oh my goodness, I'm putting my work out there. This is my baby. This is something I spent weeks doing, and then now I'm having other people look at it, and what are they going to say? So it's tough when you're venturing out into this for the first time, and you're like, oh my goodness, what am I about to do? And can I handle the feedback? So yeah, it's tough sometimes.
Yeah, and I would think when you're in a classroom, the feedback is kind of organic. Like you can see in that moment if kids are getting it, if the students are relating, or if even with assessments, you can see within like a week, did the students learn it or not? But with what you're working on, it seems like a longer scale project. So you kind of have to have more feedback. And you may not have teachers, you don't have maybe, it sounds like a lot of it's remote. So you don't have also people around you being like, oh, do this or that. You've got to kind of find that community for yourself in a way.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when you're designing, like for me, when I'm designing programs for the university, or when we're working on classwork, we don't know how, you're right. We don't know how that's going to be received by the faculty, how it's going to be received by the students until they actually start teaching it and they go into that process. So it's very interesting to see, it may be months down the road before we know, was this really effective or not? Sometimes it takes a whole semester to see, what the feedback is. And okay, we're trying this. Did it really work, or do we need to tweak it? And things like that. So that can be hard because you don't get that real-time feedback sometimes. So it's very interesting. Yeah. But you get more of that collective feedback, and then you analyze it, right? And you look at it and see, okay, is this curricular related, or is this something related to the learning management system that we can't control and we can't do anything about? So being able to analyze that data, that's another thing that's very important, is evaluating the data and looking at it. So that's a big part of what we do, is not just implementing it, but looking at the data and seeing, okay, what worked, what didn't, what do we need to tweak along the way. So yeah, it's kind of interesting how it's different in that way too. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of pieces to that puzzle
Hmm.
in terms of instructional design.
Right.
I'm thinking about a teacher listening right now, and they're thinking they might want to pivot. Maybe they want to get a master's degree and just, get the numbers so they can get a higher pay scale at the school.
Right.
But maybe they're thinking I want to pivot this possibly into a career. What are some mistakes that you would maybe be like, definitely, be careful of this? Maybe a few things you'd be like, just be careful of this when you're pivoting.
That's good. Yeah, I like that. I would say try not to jump into anything. Try to do the research, right? And I would say, kind of back to earlier, kind of see what's your passion? What, if you want to go into this field, kind of do some research, talk to others that, like myself, that are in the field, and what are some of the pros and cons of it? Because there's, just like with everything, there's always the pros and cons of it, and will it fit with what you're doing? And so, yeah, I would say just make sure that you're not rushing into it and look into, that those different things and those different requirements that they're looking for. And it's okay if if you apply for certain positions and you don't get them the first time, that's okay. It's a learning experience. And I think it's okay to do that. And I would say just maybe even look at your community and see, is there a gap or is there a need within your community? So it could be if you volunteer somewhere or your church or something like that. And you can see, is there a need for something where I could fill a gap or fill a need? And then maybe volunteer or do something like that and see if you can do something that's low stakes like that, where you can be able to practice it a little bit and say, and then you can mention that to the whoever's heading up that particular project or something like that. And you can say, hey, can I try this out and do this? It's almost like an internship in a way, where, you're kind of testing the waters a little bit. So I would say do that. But yeah, I would say just kind of take it slow and not rush it for sure.
I I love that idea of maybe volunteering a little bit with creating something maybe for, like you said, like a nonprofit or something like that, because then you have a portfolio. I would imagine if I was applying, if you're applying for a job and you had some things and if you're creating like these portfolios, you could share and say, I've done this, this, and this. That would help the person who's hiring you to understand your style and how you work, probably.
Right.
Is that how it works?
Yeah,
Kind of? Yeah, yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. And I would say too, don't feel like you have to create some huge big project, right? Like it has to have all these like it has to be a big e-learning and it has to have all these bells and whistles. Just I would say start small. That would be my other piece of advice. Start small and maybe work on an infographic and then maybe a short little video or something like that, and then build up your skills as you go. Because I think a lot of things that new instructional designers try to do is they try to learn too much at once and then they get overwhelmed, and that can be easy to do, especially with all the technology out there. And as we know, AI is really taken over everything, even our industry. And there was that fear for a while that, oh my goodness, they're not going to be any more instructional designers, there aren't going to be any more curriculum developers, no editors. My whole department, everybody started panicking. And I don't know about K through 12 if that happened, but in higher ed we were all like, what do we do? Oh my goodness, is our job's going to be gone? And so yeah, so I think being able to understand what's out there, and I would say also don't be fearful of the technology, embrace it, learn it as you go, because it's just something, it's always going to change. So as soon as you learn something, it'll change. So being adaptable, I think is a key, and not being like, oh, I'm only going to learn this. But so it's either one or the other. Either, they're fearful of learning the technology. Some of my students are like that, or they they take on too much at one time. And I'm like, whoa, slow down a little bit. It's like take one at a time and don't feel like you have to learn it all at once, because some of it will come learning on the job. That's how I learned some of the technology. So yeah, so just be graceful with yourself along the way. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot to learn, and like you said, it's always changing, so
Right.
it's kind of always gonna be a
Yeah.
journey. In terms of, let's say that a teacher wants to learn more about this, are there resources, books, podcasts, communities? You mentioned communities already, but books
Right.
and podcasts that you would recommend for teachers to learn more about instructional
Yeah,
design?
that's a great question. Let me look up I've got my other screen here. So let me look up just so I don't forget it. So, of course, there's,
Well, of course yours.
right. Yeah. So there's mine. I would say also the e-learning coach by Connie Malamed. I actually had her on my podcast not too long ago. She has a podcast and she knows so much about instructional design and e-learning. She's been in the field for quite a while, and she actually has a course. It's called Mastering Instructional Design, and it's really good for new ideas to be able to get into that. I would also recommend, it's called Dear Instructional Designer by Kristen Anthony, and her name is spelled Kristin. It's a little bit different, Kristen Anthony. And then also there's another one, it's by TechSmith, which is, they're the creators of Snagit and Camtasia. It's called The Visual Lounge, and they talk about visual design and visual media, which is something that Connie talks a lot about. That's an area that's not touched upon a lot. So it's a really good one because you get to learn about the science and the art behind visual design and why that's important. It doesn't touch too much on instructional design, but we use visual design quite a bit in instructional design. So that's a really good one. And then there's some good books. Julie Dirksen has a really good book called Design for How People Learn, and that helps you kind of understand how learners And in K through 12, you do have that, but that's kind of from that instructional design lens. And then another one that I love too, it's in some of the courses, one of the courses I teach, it's by Cami Bean. It's called The Accidental Instructional Designer. So I always tell a lot of my students, I'm like, you've been an instructional designer in many ways, you just didn't know it. So I call myself the accidental instructional designer too. So yeah. So I think those are good different resources they can refer to. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. There's quite a few there that people can definitely latch onto and maybe look into. So thank you for sharing
Sure.
all that.
Yeah. Oh, there's another
Yeah.
one too. I that's in one of the classes. It's by Don Norman, and it's a yellow book. And I'll see if I can pull it up. So it's called "The Design of Everyday Things," and it's got a teapot on it. So it's yellow with a red teapot. So it's a good way to. That's a good book too because it talks about it's about the psychology behind that and how things are designed and how if we understand how the little like the things in life are designed, then we can become a better instructional designer because then we are able to and my students actually have an assignment like that where they have to look at everyday objects or something that's good that was designed well and why, and then something that wasn't designed well and they have to be able to understand what's the difference, right? And how would they go about making it better. So that's a really good book too. So it's kind of neat to see that and see what they pick and how they explain that one that was poorly designed and why and what they would do to make it better. So it's really neat. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think design really transmutes beyond instruction. It really goes beyond in terms of how does everything design in our life? How is this microphone designed? How are applications designed? All those things are really creative process
Right.
that are changing always. So
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. 'Cause there's so many people that go behind designing something, right? So it's really neat and it kind of helps you see that it doesn't just become a product. There has to be so much that goes into that. So, and that's kind of how the instructional design process works too, because as I mentioned earlier, there's the ADDIE model, which is a common model that's used. So it has those phases. It has analysis, design, development, implementation, evaluation. And so it's very common for stakeholders to want to skip the first and the last. They want to skip analysis and they want to just jump right into design. And whoa, let's stop. Let's do analysis first. Let's see, if training is going to be the right thing or if the issue that we're seeing, what's going to be the real solution for it. Analysis is very important. And then they want to skip evaluation. They want to implement and then they just want to let it go. And I'm like, whoa, so it's very interesting how those bookends are important and they just want to do what's in the middle. And I'm just like, okay, I understand you want to get this out, but we got to evaluate it too and make sure it's working and not just put something out there and just let it sit. So yeah.
Yeah, those bookends are such a big part of the design process. It's sometimes overlooked.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think teachers listening right now are thinking a lot. They're thinking maybe this is a career or just something they're interested in. There's also maybe a little bit of intimidation. They're thinking, I've been a teacher for who knows, 10, 15, 20
Right.
years. What advice would you have for them managing kind of the emotional side of a career pivot into instructional design? Do you have any maybe stories of maybe things that people you've seen do it or ideas or things that you would recommend?
Right. Yes. Yeah. It can be scary to jump into something else, pivot, do that career change. And so, yeah, so I would say look at those areas that you're interested in that you really love and where your passions are and see how can I fulfill a need because instructional design is an area that is constantly growing and evolving. So look at those areas where you really really love that. So if you love working with adults, say you're in a K through 12 education environment and you love doing professional development, and that's where you thrive, then you can say, okay, that's an area that I really love and that I always enjoy doing. And then look at those areas and see, okay, now let me learn about some of the models and the theories that relate to adult learning and you can start to even kind of learn some of that before you get any formal education. So, yeah, definitely kind of look to see what your passions are and start to build upon that and then go from there and see where it leads you and be open to that because I think it's so important to not close any doors to that and just be open to it and know that it's okay to stumble along the way. And if you feel like you failed at something, that's okay, because they say a setback can be a setup for something better. So don't give up. If you feel like, okay, yeah, I didn't quite do well with that project that I worked on, or, or I don't feel like I'm getting far with this, just stay the course and it'll be okay. Because if it's meant to be, and if you know that it's your passion, then you'll be able to do that and make a living out of it. So yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate you saying that to kind of follow your passions because that makes it a little less intimidating because you already have an interest, you already have experience potentially. So following that to start the process is makes it a lot less
Right.
intimidating.
Yeah, and it
So
doesn't feel like
yeah.
work. It feels like something where you're able to make a difference every day. Because for me, I feel like I'm making a difference in students' lives, whether I'm doing the curriculum work or I'm an instructor, and now with the podcast, so it's those different elements where, yeah, you find your passion, and then feel it, and then you can start small and then kind of, build it up from there. So yeah, don't feel like you have to jump in both feet and go, okay, I'm gonna just plunge into it, yeah. So, because I know it's hard when you've got a family, or, you have to make sure, okay, I can't leave this job and go to do something else right away. I have to be able to make sure it's going to work for me, so I don't jump into it and then realize, oh no, this is not what I was expecting. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, pivoting can be such a whirlwind, but if you get to the right position, then it's, the right fit. Would you be able to share, I know maybe anonymously in terms of like the student, but could you share maybe a story of a student that, was a teacher and then moved into instructional design and it was maybe more of a success story. It's a story that you felt like you saw them in a new place that felt right for them?
Yes, that's a great question. And I actually had this particular student on my podcast, so I'm sure she won't mind me naming her.
Okay.
Yeah, so her name is Sakina Branford. She was on one of my and it's been released, so it's live now. So if they go to my podcast and they search her name, Sakina Branford, she was a K through 12 educator, I believe, for 15 years, and then she went into the instructional design program. I had her for about 3 classes, and I we did the capstone that she was in my capstone with me. So it was really neat. And then I was like, Sakina, you need to come on my podcast, because in the midst of that capstone, she got a job opportunity for a global corporate company, and as an instructional designer. So that was a big shift for her. And but she said that the program really helped her, and I was able to help her kind of prepare for that interview. I met with her prior to the interview, and I said, yeah, let me know if you want to meet beforehand and I can go over some of your questions. So I would say, definitely, lean on those that that are already in the field and say, hey, can I meet with you? Because most of the time, whether it's your instructor, if you're in a program, or if you know someone that you've connected with and networked with, don't be afraid to reach out to them and say, hey, can I meet with you? And just maybe go over some of my interview questions. And because you may not always get that first job, but I think it's important to, be able to practice. But for her, she just went into it, and I said, just take it slow and know that you're going to have the training, new hire training, and that'll be important. Just, you know, learn the systems as you go. She did. And so far, it's been really successful for her. And she's really loved it and made that pivot to corporate. And she hasn't looked back. So she loves it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's those kinds of stories that make you listening, thinking, okay, if someone wants to do this, they can do it. And teaching does have a lot of that overlap. And I think teachers, in my experience, many teachers are just some of the most hardworking people out there. And I
Yes.
think that that makes them really good candidates for any job they decide to do, whether it's in teaching or out. I think that they're really capable.
Right.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah. Yeah. Kind of finishing off this conversation, we're learning so much. Are there any final thoughts you want to share with educators that we haven't yet covered?
Right. Yes. I would say, gosh, what's a good thing? I would say just trust your instincts, and yeah, and trust what your passions are, and know, and don't doubt yourself. I think that's the most important thing. And know that if you pivot and you decide to change, that it's okay if you make mistakes along the way, kind of what I went back to earlier. That's okay, because you learn as you go. And it's okay to, just as long as if you stumble a little bit, just pick yourself back up and just try again. I've learned that. I learned every day. I've been doing this 15 years, Annie, and I still learn things. So I think that's also good too. Having that continuous improvement and continuous learning, I think is so important. If we become stagnant in anything we do, but in this field that's always changing and evolving in education, I think that can harm us more than help us. So I think having that adaptability and being able to be able to understand that things are going to change and be okay with that, because one thing that's constant where I work is change. We're always evolving and changing. Yeah,
Yeah.
accreditation is a big part of that. And I think those that are in education in K through 12 know that you have state standards, you have national standards. So the curriculum I work with, it has accreditation tied to it. So yeah, so I can relate to that, and I can understand how that has a lot to it. So yeah, so I would say just be open to changes, because there's always things that are bound to change in the industry. Yeah.
Yes, not just I feel like professionally, but I think personally in life too. It's a great skill to have to be adaptable
Right.
and be willing to make mistakes and just keep moving on.
Right.
So,
Exactly.
yeah. To finish off, I always have some fun questions for the audience to get to know you better. You can answer as quick or as long as you like. There's four of
Sure.
them. The first question is your favorite teacher lunch or favorite lunch in general?
Well, I remember when I was a kid, my mom would pack me peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. So I always like PB&J. So that's, I think, one of my favorite lunches as a kid. Those are fun.
I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah, easy. Your best behavior management tip for a classroom?
Ooh, I would say that's a good question, because I teach online, so I'm trying to think of behavior management. I would say when you're working in groups, just making sure that you don't have stragglers coming in, and try to follow up with them, because I had a group project that my students had to work on in the class I just finished teaching, and I'm going to teach another section of it coming up. So I have one particular group where the student didn't know that it was a group project, and so I had to kind of wrangle him in a little bit, and I'm like, so yeah, kind of watching when you're doing group projects is so important, because it's inevitable you're going to have some that are just going to straggle, or they're just going to be, oh, I didn't know that. I'm like, yeah, okay, you didn't know it was a group project. I put out announcements. So I think just being patient with my students is so important when it comes to classroom management, and not trying to assume, because I think so many times, especially in online, but even in a physical classroom, you can assume. And I'm like, well, that student could have had something going on at home or something going on at work, and they could, have multiple jobs that they're trying to manage. So I've learned over time not to assume right away, and to actually give them a little bit of grace and go, okay, I'll just reach out to them and see what happens. So yeah, that's a good classroom management
Yeah.
technique, is just have grace
Yes.
for them, and they'll have grace for you as well.
Yeah. Having grace and always checking in on those group projects. I know for even for students too, you're like, are you all doing the work? Are you all helping out?
Exactly. Yep.
Right. A teacher that made a difference in your life.
Yes, I would say my music teacher. She was my music teacher from fifth grade, and I learned how to play the flute when I was in fifth grade. So she was very patient with all of us. And the flute, if anyone's familiar with the flute, it has three parts to it. And so instead of her having and this is actually, I think, what I realize now as I'm talking about this is kind of what instructional design is about. So she had us work on the first part, and the clarinet's like this too. It has multiple parts, but rather than having us learn all the keys at once and learning how to properly blow into the flute in order to make the proper sound, she's like, work with this part first, master that. Then we're going to add the second part. You're going to learn the keys for that, and then you master that, and then you're gonna put on the third part. And so that's kind of how instructional design is. So I didn't realize that until I thought of that example. But she was just so patient with me and with all the others in music class, and yet she had to manage, right, all these students with different instruments, and she was able to do it. I don't know how she did it, but Mrs. Blevins, yeah, I remember Mrs. Blevins. Yeah,
What a sweet memory.
yeah.
Yeah. All right. Last question here for quick questions is the last lesson you taught.
Ooh, I would say it was this last class that I just did. It was about organizational workplace development. And so it was a really great class, because what I love about just the lesson itself each week is that each one built upon each other. So it was scaffolded really well. The curriculum was built really well. And they had two opportunities to do AI in their assignments, which is really great. I loved it. So they did one on situational leadership, which was really neat. So they had to actually learn the model, and then they had to learn about the different readiness styles and how would they work with an individual that was, say, at a readiness one where they were nervous, right? And they weren't sure about the project, and you have to work with them. And then they had to kind of, and they used AI to do that. It's really neat. And then there was another readiness style that was kind of arrogant and like, yeah, I know everything. I just want to do the work. I just want to get it done. I've had people like that. So yeah, so it was really neat to see them work through that and understand it. So it was a pretty neat class, and I enjoyed, getting to know each of them through that. So yeah, I would say that was a cool lesson to have them learn about those leadership styles as well.
Yeah. Yeah. What a nice way to kind of like learn about your students and learn about themselves a little
Hmm.
bit. Yeah. 11 lessons kind of help with the whole person, you know?
Right.
Yeah. Well, Jackie, thank you so much for coming on today. It's been just a pleasure to hear all about instructional
Yeah,
design. And you really do have, like you said, 15 years of experience, and you can hear that in the conversation. You really have brought so much value. If teachers want to reach out to you or listen to your podcast, where can they find you? And I'll link right below this video as well.
sure. Yes. So my podcast is on all major platforms like Apple, Spotify, all of that. So they can just search Designing with Love, and they'll see the logo it'll have the pink background with the checkered heart. So just look for that with my name on there. I also am on Buy Me a Coffee if they want to support the work, keep the mic on. That's always a great way to do that as well. Or if they just want to chat with me, they can go on LinkedIn. I'm very active. I'm on LinkedIn, I think, every day now. Free to connect with me professionally, and I'd be happy to meet with you or anything like that. Because I always love meeting with educators and connecting with them. So yeah, and I love it. It's a lot of fun.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again, Jackie, for being here. And I look forward to hearing in the comments what teachers are saying and hearing all that they are going to do with this information.
Great. I love it. Thank you, Annie, so much for having me on the podcast.